Ontario Premier Doug Ford looks poised to call an early election amid tariff chaos. This was Ford's message today.
Stay tuned. But we need a mandate from the people. We need a mandate to protect and possibly spend billions of dollars to protect people's jobs, to protect businesses, and to protect communities.
Opposition leaders say Ford's majority government already has a strong mandate and should hold off on the election call until its planned scheduled date in 2026. Despite this, late Monday night, Ford's chief of staff emailed party workers, telling them our government will need a strong mandate from the people to stand up for Ontario with President Trump. And sources tell me the call could come next Wednesday with a vote on February 27th. Ontario NDP Leader Marit Stiles joins me now. Ms. Stiles, it's good to see you. Thanks for taking the time today.
Great to be here.
Are you ready to go when he does this next week? I know you thought you had another year, and here we are. What do you think?
Well, that's right. I mean, the election isn't set until June 2026, so this will be almost a year and a half early. Look, if Mr. Ford is willing to go to an election like this, he says he has to have a mandate. My goodness, I have to say that if the mandate of a premier with a majority government isn't already pretty clear, it is in fact to stand up for every single person, every single Ontarian, and every single job. I don't know what his mandate is then. But if he wants to go to an election right now, we will be ready.
He says he needs the new mandate because they could be required to spend billions of dollars they weren't planning on spending to support people and businesses should Donald Trump go ahead with his economic threats. Is there any value in that argument from your perspective?
Well, look, first of all, I think if Mr. Ford decides to call this election, it's not going to be about protecting those jobs. Everybody in Ontario that I'm talking to knows that this is really only going to be about Mr. Ford protecting his own job. He didn't need a mandate when he spent almost $2.5 billion to subsidize an Austrian luxury spa company in downtown Toronto. He didn't look for a mandate when he decided to cut how much funding our schools get or any number of enormous expenses like carving up the Greenbelt. He's never looked for a mandate for any of that. So it's pretty rich coming from Mr. Ford. And I think that at the end of the day, even though he may want to think that this election is going to be about that, I think he cannot escape his record. That's what he's trying to do. And I'll be there and to remind people of his record. And that's what I'm hearing from people all across Ontario is that, in fact, Mr. Ford and his record is what they're going to be looking at on Election Day, whether or not their life is any better 7 years in.
He's got a majority of about 20 plus seats, right, in Queen's Park, right? Like he's in no danger of falling. If he were to come to the legislature with a spending request to subsidize Ontario businesses and workers and others who could be affected by whatever trade action President Trump takes, would the NDP and the Ontario, I'm not going to ask you to speak for the Ontario Liberals, but what is your sense? Would you support it if it wasn't a ridiculous plan?
Right. Yeah, I've actually already said to the Premier, I've been very clear over the last few weeks that if he comes forward with a plan, we are the official opposition, the NDP in Ontario, and as the leader of the official opposition here, I'm prepared to support that plan. I mean, obviously we want to see what it says, but we've said all along that we think the best route for Ontarians is a strong and unified approach to this. But again, it seems pretty clear, and I think he's not fooling anyone. I can tell you out there as I'm traveling around the province, Windsor, Niagara, Sudbury, Thunder Bay, people are talking about this, but they're saying, look, Doug Ford is trying to escape his record. And I don't think people are going to fall for that. I think they know what this is about. He thinks he can distract from his record. But the reality is that right now in Ontario, if you need an emergency room, you don't know if it's going to be open in your community. 2.5 million Ontarians don't have a family doctor. And as you know, housing prices are just through the roof, and they're not getting better. And I think that is what people are going to be looking at come Election Day. In
a speech Doug Ford gave today behind closed doors, but my friend and colleague Rob Benzie obtained a recording of it for the Toronto Star. Doug Ford says, I can tell you one thing, a strong mandate from the Ontario people sends a message down to the United States. Do you think Donald Trump cares about the state of play in the Ontario legislature? I mean, this is going to be the argument Premier Ford has built a profile and gotten a lot of praise for his actions in coming to the defense of Team Canada in response to Donald Trump. What do you make of him making this the centerpiece of an early election call?
I mean, I think, again, I would go back to where people are at right now. What puts us in a strong position going into a potential, a threat like we're facing right now from the United States? What puts us in a good position is a strong province. And that means a strong public health care system, right? It means strong support programs for the people of Ontario. Absolutely. The number one job of a premier in a moment like this, when we're facing this existential threat, is to stand up for the people of Ontario, make sure we are there for them. That's what I will do when I am premier of this province. And that is what any premier should be doing. It should be their first focus. Heading to the polls right now is not going to be about that. He already has a majority government, and I think people are going to see through it. At Election Day, people are going to be asking themselves, is my life any better after 7 years of Conservative government in Ontario? Mr. Ford is hoping that they'll be distracted by what's going on in the United States. I think they're going to see that what is needed right now is unity of purpose, is a strong and comprehensive plan to respond to those threats, and a government that has their back, and a government that's on their side.
Speaking of distractions, just to get your sense of the lay of the political landscape at the provincial level in Ontario, because you've got a federal leader, you're the provincial leader. The Liberals are in a very different situation. Bonnie Crombie and Chrystia Freeland share some workers, and you're just going to have Liberals at the federal and provincial level competing for money, candidates, and volunteers all at the same time. It seems to me Doug Ford will be the front runner here. The polls would suggest it. He's the incumbent premier, but this opens up an opportunity for the Ontario NDP if the Liberals are in this kind of a situation. How do you see the road ahead?
Well, this is obviously an exceptional circumstance. We're heading into a snap election, and that hasn't boded well for previous governments in Ontario, I would remind everybody. But look, what I'm focused on is what we need to do to get ready for this election. And that means motivating people, identifying our candidates. We're going to run candidates in every single riding. And I'm telling Ontarians, look, again, Doug Ford thinks he can distract from his record. I see this as an exceptional opportunity for change in the province of Ontario, and for people to have a government that's on your side. And so one of the things I was really excited about just this past weekend, and I think in contrast to maybe where Mr. Ford thinks things are at, is we had a campaign training school, and almost 1,000 people showed up, and these were mostly young people, showed up to learn how to win elections for the NDP. So I'm feeling like people are motivated out there. They see the opportunity for change here in Ontario. And, we did it in Manitoba not so long ago. We're feeling good here and ready. And I'm looking forward. If Doug Ford wants to call that election, I say bring it on.
Yeah, I know you say you want to fight it on the issue set that speaks specifically to the Ontario situation and to Ontario voters. But with this threat of Donald Trump just hanging over everything, and Ford putting himself so much in the middle of it, you run the risk of having that just drowning everything out, especially if tariffs do come in the middle of this election campaign, right? So how difficult of a challenge is it going to be to bust through if that is where things end up and if Donald Trump is true to his word here?
Yeah, well, certainly, as I said, I mean, the threats from President Trump are existential threats to Ontario's economy. They are, of course, our most important trade partner. So it is not an insignificant thing. And my approach to this has always been that we need to be working with, as other premiers, with the federal government, a comprehensive plan and response. I want to get to the negotiating table and actually have those negotiations instead of negotiating with ourselves right now. And I have to say, what I've seen from Mr. Ford so far is a whole lot of different things, but it feels a bit like a plan that's been written up on the back of a napkin. And it doesn't seem like a comprehensive plan to actually, maybe we will be looking at retaliatory tariffs. But we need a comprehensive plan. And we need to work with our allies, and frankly, our allies outside of just simply the United States as well. We have friends out there. So that's how I see it. I mean, I think Mr. Ford, again, has been kind of throwing a lot of spaghetti at the wall and seeing what'll stick. But I really think we need a stronger, more unified and calmer approach to this because this is going to be significant. And, about 500,000 jobs potentially at risk in the province of Ontario. No small thing. But Mr. Ford, if he goes to the polls, I think people know that this is only about him looking after his job.
Ontario NDP Leader Marit Stiles, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll hopefully talk to you throughout the campaign. Thanks so much.